Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never practice nunchucks in a crowded room. Never eat chole before a road trip. Always take your shirt off before you iron it. Don't take a call near a swimming pool. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Like the devil himself, the blasphemous image had been hiding in plain sight, radiating corruption from its lair onto the dusty library shelf and into the city of the faithful. Then in May 1973, a student at a college in Islamabad, or Anantnag as it's also named after the serpent of the god Vishnu, discovered an image of the Archangel Gabriel dictating the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad. Local clerics, outraged, called for protests against the Book of Knowledge, a children's encyclopedia. Violence followed, in which 4 people were killed. The protesters demanded the hanging of the author of the book, a vain demand historian Catherine Frank has wryly noted, since Arthur Mee had died in England in 1943. For Kashmir, the riots would mark the first bend in a long road that led to the long jihad which erupted a decade and a half later. Last week, the political formation that more than any other powered that journey, the banned Jamaat-e-Islami Jammu and Kashmir, said it now wishes to contest elections and work within the democratic system. We believe in democracy, Jamaat leader Ghulam Qadir Wani told journalists. The Jamaat has been here before. Even though the Jamaat Constitution of 1953 demands that societies, I quote, acknowledge only the divine code, rejecting anything not in consonance with his command, and rejects any mortal's authority to be an absolute lawgiver or legislator, it has been quite pragmatic in its relationships with secular power. In 1963, Jamaat-backed independent candidates fought in panchayat elections. The patriarch of the party and Kashmir's jihadist movement, Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani, was a 3-time member of the Legislative Assembly and drew his pension till his dying day. Lyndon Johnson, the infamously vulgar, crotch-scratching 36th President of the United States, once said it was better to have enemies inside the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in. Delhi needs to decide if Mr. Johnson was right. The story began with words, not pictures. Late in 1937, the young son of one of Kashmir's storied Sufi families began reading the Islamist radical Abul Ala Maududi's Musalman or Maujuda Siyasi Kashmakash, a critique of the Muslim League's two-nation theory, which advocated for multiple semi-independent states instead. Then a teacher at the Anjuman Nusratul Islam's high school in Srinagar, and among the very few Kashmiri Muslims of his generation with a college degree, Saaduddin Tarabali began a correspondence with Maududi. Late in the 19th century, Srinagar's most powerful religious leader, the Mirwais Rasul Shah, had set up the Anjuman Nusratul Islam as a means to encourage modern education among Kashmir's new generation of Muslims. Large numbers of Kashmiri Muslims also began to acquire university degrees in the colleges of British India. The historian Chitralekha Zutshi has shown that this class used Islam as a language to assert entitlements and rights under the Dogra monarchy, which basically ran what we would today call a Hindu Rashtra. Tarabali soon drew new recruits, most influential among them the 1929 born son of a landless labourer from the North Kashmir village of Zurimanj in 1929, that's Gilani. The National Conference leader Muhammad Saeed Masoodi treated Gilani as a son, allowing him to obtain an education and serve as editor of the National Conference Party newspaper. Education was seen as key to the Islamist project by the Jamaat leadership. The Jamaat's 125 schools were, by 1975, serving an estimated 25,000 students. The Jamaat believed, writes scholar Yoginder Sikand, that these schools were the trenches in the fight against a cultural onslaught by Hindu India, which sought to, I quote, destroy the Islamic identity of the Kashmiris through Hinduizing the school syllabus. To truly influence the polity, though, the Jamaat knew it needed power. In 1971, it fought the Lok Sabha elections without success, but won state-level representation the next year. Gilani served in the assembly in 1972, 1977 and 1987. For Kashmiri Islamists, the period after 1971 was one of continuous reverses. In 1975, Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah, long incarcerated for demanding a plebiscite on Kashmir's future, signed an accord with Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, dropping his demand for independence and agreeing to a dramatic expansion of central government authority. In return, Sheikh Abdullah was made Chief Minister. The agreement, political scientist Sten Wildman has noted, reflected a wider breakdown of faith in Pakistan and its claims to represent Islam in South Asia. The Jamaat responded to this change in circumstances with a campaign of religious agitprop, beginning with the Book of Knowledge riots. The historian Alistair Lamb notes that Prime Minister Indira Gandhi became increasingly panicked that Abdullah's successor, Chief Minister Farooq Abdullah, was losing control, that he wasn't on top of the situation. The Prime Minister feared a cricket match protest was, quote, the first phase of a general Islamic rebellion against the Hindu domination of New Delhi. Large-scale communal violence broke out in 1986 after Jamaat cadre protested against the opening of the Babri Masjid to Hindu worshippers. Local Jamaat activists, case records show, set fire to Kashmiri Pandit-owned homes and temples, casting this violence as vengeance for anti-Muslim rioting elsewhere in India. Following the end of the emergency in 1977, when the Jamaat had been driven underground, the party hoped to capitalize on the opening of democratic space. The Jamaat fought the 1977 elections in alliance with the Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Jan Sangh, wanting to undermine the Congress National Conference bloc. The party was, however, decimated in the elections. Political scientists Ghulam Qadir Bhatt and Khurshid Ahmad Wani have written. The rigged elections of 1987 finally convinced young Jamaat radicals that there was no future in democratic politics. They needed to go to Pakistan for help. Likely, the Jamaat political leadership understood what this jihadist turn of its cadre would eventually lead to. Later, Gilani lamented in his prison diaries that the jihad had actually gone out of control of the political leadership and into the hands of militant youth. They have, he concluded, apparently miscalculated the enormity of the demands of the struggle and the strength of the power they are fighting against, fondly imagining that their goal would be achieved in no time. As late as August 1989, Gilani attended a meeting called by Chief Minister Farooq to consider responses to the growing violence on the streets. I was the only participant in the meeting, he later said, who suggested resolving issues through dialogue. Even if the wealth of the whole of India is put in my pocket, Gilani promised at a press conference in 2010, I will not barter away the sacrifices of our martyrs. The Islamist leader was by then speaking a very different language from his own party and cut off from its leadership. The Jamaat had been treated badly through the 1980s by the Indian security forces and pro-India militia. Lots of its leaders were killed, tortured. The Indian government began backing Chief Minister Mufti Muhammad Saeed's People's Democratic Party, though, in an effort to create a counterweight to the National Conference. This involved bringing the Jamaat back on board. Large numbers of Jamaat leaders saw opportunity to re-emerge from the shadows. In May 2003, Jamaat moderates led by Syed Nazir Ahmad Kashani retired Gilani as their political representative in the secessionist All Parties Hurriyat Conference umbrella organization. Early the next year, the Jamaat's Majlis-e-Shura or Central Consultative Council went public with a commitment to, I quote, democratic and constitutional struggle, the same language it's using now. The strains inside the Jamaat had long been crystallizing, you see. In 1997, the then Jamaat chief Ghulam Bhatt had called for an end to gun culture, a statement later revealed to have come about as part of a secret dialogue process between India's intelligence services and secessionists. The dialogue had the backing of some pro-dialogue figures in the Hizbul Mujahideen, the Jamaat-e-Islami's armed wing. Gilani's discourse, by contrast, radicalized. In a 1998 book, he suggested that Kashmir's secession from India was essential for the survival of Islam itself. For Muslims to live among Hindus, he argued, was as difficult as, I quote, for a fish to stay alive in a desert. Gilani now turned to Islamists outside the Jamaat-e-Islami, like Naeem Khan's Kashmir Front and Shakil Bakshi's Islamic Students League, to build a movement that would give life to this vision. In the summer of 2008, matters came to a head after the state government granted temporary land use rights for facilitating the annual pilgrimage to the Amarnath shrine in southern Kashmir. Gilani claimed this land use issue was a conspiracy to settle Hindus in the region. The authorities were working, he claimed, on an agenda of changing the demography of the state. I caution my nation, he thundered, that if we don't wake up in time, India and its stooges will succeed and we will be displaced. For the next 10 years, until the end of Article 370, violent Islamist-led agitations rocked Kashmir, as Gilani's supporters made determined efforts to succeed where the Kalashnikovs of the jihadists had failed. Like it did in 1969 and again in 2002, the Jamaat is now seeking to deal itself back into the political game and use power to propel its ideological project instead of guns. Though New Delhi has often sought to use the Jamaat to counter Kashmiri ethnic nationalism, the results have been less than roseate. The rise of the People's Democratic Party was meant to draw Islamists into the fold of politics. Instead, Islamists succeeded in hijacking the political system and subverted democracy. The entire state was almost brought down. Kashmir's Jamaat-e-Islami has shown it can put pragmatism before principle in its pursuit of power. There's no reason to believe, though, that it's prepared to abandon its toxic communal project. Delhi must be very careful before letting it back into the tent. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.